What's going on, my people? Happy Software Sundays. I'm your host, KD, and this show is presented by Build, Learn, Impact. And our mission is to inform, educate, and to start discussions around technology and the type of transformations that it's leading inside of technology. So, with that being said, I'm your host, KD. Thank you for being here. If you're a returning builder, welcome back. If you're new to the show, I hope you enjoy. So with that being said, let's get started. I do want to pause a few announcements. So happy birthday to Ashton. It's his ninth birthday this week, so I hope that goes wonderful. I hope he's feeling marvelous. Mama, also happy birthday to you. Hope you're feeling youthful and lively and that you're staying warm in this weather. So happy birthday to you. I think we still in Capricorn season, so go Capricorns and all that. Uh, but you know, let's get started. So the first story I wanted to just highlight is the fact that Elon Musk is currently suing OpenAI for up to $134 billion. He wants OpenAI and Microsoft to pay these billions for damages caused by basically them lying to their funders because they initially started as a nonprofit before transitioning to a for profit and deciding to commercialize AI and the development of AI. His claim really revolves around the fact that they misrepresented their goal of creating AI that was open for everyone and that was also, designed for security and transparency for society at large. If you think back, Elon was a co-founder of OpenAI back in 2018, and back in 2015, and eventually left in 2018 due to some disagreements on the direction of the company. And I think he wanted to move into for-profit back then. Also, it's just he didn't agree on how it should have been structured and how long it would take to actually make that transition. But this is a very important legal battle for OpenAI. They're trying to get the entire case dismissed because for a number of reasons, and they're going back and forth to court to figure out if he even has the jurisdiction or the authority to make a claim for damages, considering that although he was a founder, he was also just a donor to the organization. So that's going to be settled and handled all in court. But if OpenAI has to pay even the minimal amount, which was $79 billion that he's asking for, if they have to pay that amount right now, that's going to be extremely detrimental to their business. OpenAI, although they have reached a tremendous amount of growth with their ChatGPT products and their distribution into different cloud providers and different enterprises building with their models, they still have yet to turn a profit. If you think about the immense amount of capital required to continuously train and run some of these models, it makes sense that they haven't really generated enough revenue yet to be able to sustain a profitable business. Despite being unprofitable, they're still able to continue and work because they have investors who are willing to, you know, bankroll them while they're continuing to gain and drive their market share. But if they have to pay this additional fee, this is going to severely cripple their ability to invest the necessary capital into the technological breakthroughs that they need to make. Uh, the hole that this additional fee will put them in is going to be incredibly difficult to drive to basically pull themselves out of, especially at a time where their competition has been growing. The amount of investment inside of AI and the different companies in the space has been growing and the amount of capital you need to actually continue to develop your models, that hasn't slowed down at all. So they need every dollar available just to continue to keep up in this race. So this the conclusion of this legal battle will really decide what's possible for them and whether or not they will sustain in the next technological run into the future. It is interesting that given their precarious state uh, and then not having been able to become profitable yet, and Elon has a competitor in XAI where he's developing his own frontier models. It's going to be interesting because it almost seems like he's trying to get rid of a competitor in the space, and this is definitely a way to do that. But we'll see what really comes from it and if he really gets that money. Another thing to highlight with that is just to consider right now they're a OpenAI is a for-profit company and they started off as a non-profit company. The entire formation uh, reason between those two types of entities is different. It's begging the question who should be allowed to own the development of AI, and should it be a public good inside of a nonprofit company, or should it be a for profit uh, product that can be owned and licensed and developed in the uh, private space? The future development of AI is really going to require a lot of capital, and it's going to be very interesting who is going to own the safety of those AI models as they are developed. Because if the public owns it, then the public can have some type of transparency and uh, clarity inside of the direction that AI is being developed in. If it's purely for profit inside of a private company, that level of governance is not really required, especially for a private company, not even a private company that's publicly traded, which OpenAI is not as of yet. So something to keep in mind as these two billionaires or three billionaires, if you throw in Microsoft, are figuring out who's going to drive the next wave of technological advancements in the globe, not even just the US. And speaking of another competitor inside of the AI space, Sequoia Capital is currently planning to invest inside of Anthropic. Right now, Anthropic is raising around $10 billion to continue to invest inside of their company and the models that they're developing. The current raise is being led by GIC and Coatue, which are pretty big names inside of investment and venture fund capital. GIC is the sovereign wealth fund of Singapore, and their strategy revolves around long term infrastructure size bets and making sure that the wealth of their nation is going to last and be preserved across the next decades. Uh, Coatue is more of a short term market driven play that they help companies scale from just initial growth companies to scaling a product to reach enterprise markets. Uh, that combination of investment and support really puts Anthropic in a very interesting place because it signals that there's short term value as well as long term value for the investors and the company itself. It's it's kind of positioning Anthropic as a infrastructure company, long-term infrastructure company, similar to the cloud providers or even utility companies that currently dominate the market. I say dominate, not so much utility companies, but you can't imagine a world today without the energy grid and the companies that actually support those. They may not be growing as quickly as some of the other technology companies, but there's no way you can extract the power utilities from the current infrastructure and the current way society is trending. It just wouldn't work. So, with that being said, Anthropic, in their place as an infrastructure company, is going to be a product and a technology that other companies build on top of versus other companies being able to enter the space and compete directly with them. That's going to shift the entire uh, wave of AI right now because right now it's still a race. There's still different labs all competing to get some of the market share. Once Anthropic reaches, or it could be Anthropic, it could be OpenAI. We also have 11 labs and other uh, competitors that are building their own models. Once the field and the players are established and they start really dominating and controlling most of that market, it's going to be incredibly difficult for new entrants to actually come into the space. This also kind of highlights the capital intensive nature of AI and developing AI because right now it costs billions of dollars to even train and run a model. For you right now to effectively uh, participate as a competitor inside of that market, you already need billions of dollars. You already need support from the cloud providers and those hyperscalers to provide you the infrastructure, to provide you with the chips to actually allow you to train and develop those models. If you don't have those relationships and those partnerships, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to have any type of uh, chance to win in that space. And with that being said, this next $10 billion is most likely going to be spent on GPUs. It's going to be spent on custom chips, data centers, and long-term cloud contracts. Right? We've already seen partnerships between Anthropic and Amazon to provide compute for the next year and provide that investment for the next decade moving forward. So this is a very good sign for those companies and the infrastructure hardware layer of the AI uh, infrastructure build up because most of that funding will be spent on them. And potentially, even some of the AI researchers and the AI uh, talent that exists, the people that are still building models, there's still a nice amount of meat left on the bone for them to continue to, you know, get a lot of demand for their skills and their talent. And even going deeper into the infrastructure requirements to drive AI, there are some calls from state and federal lawmakers to make data centers pay more for the energy that they are drawing. I remember, I'm pretty sure that President Trump mentioned uh, similar strategies and tactics during his speech at the World Economic Forum, mentioning that the NVIDIAs and the different cloud providers that are building data centers, they've already been investing into their own power generation. They're already looking for ways to own more of their energy that's being used. And so they've already invested into nuclear, which is more of a long term bet to ensure that as the energy becomes more readily available, that they have first picks to it when it's connected to the grid. They're already aware of how important energy is going to be for their ability to dominate inside of the market. Right now, between like between the energy cost and just the actual hardware, GPUs, and memory required to run and train a model, that's where most of your cost is coming from when you're competing in that space. So if you are unable to control that lever, there's going to be more of a challenge for you as a hyperscaler to even compete with your competitors, because whoever controls the energy is going to control the industry moving forward. And there are some talks already, being done for how to actually reduce the amount of energy being used to train AI and run software in the cloud. There are advanced cooling methods that are being used to just reduce the amount of HVAC energy you need. There are advancements inside of the chips so that they are aware of how much power they're using. And there are, like I said, investments inside of nuclear energy to just make that cost a little bit more even moving forward. But none of them are really short term solutions for the drastic increases in energy that many residential customers are facing and seeing today. So, the short term solution would be to get these data centers and these companies to pay for that energy or pay more for the energy themselves today. But the challenge in that is the fact that a lot of those companies are currently receiving tax abatements for providing jobs and providing the capital required to even develop a lot of the areas where these data centers are. And if you start forcing them to pay more for the energy, or you start changing the contracts, it may shift the amount of capital going to some of these municipalities that frankly need that investment from these companies. So it's really a fine line and fine balance between who can afford to pay for it and who we need to pay for it in order to make sure that everything doesn't just go away in that area. So it's not a simple problem to solve for, and it's going to be something that directly impacts us at least for the next 5 to 10 years, because more and more data centers are going to be coming online in the next couple of years, and they're going to continue to demand more energy and more power from the grid and the generation sites, whether it's wind energy, nuclear, or natural gas. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that development is going to be regulated without causing any significant economic or environmental concerns. And that's all I wanted to share for the news that is most interesting to me right now. The major thing to keep in mind is that, and I'm going to keep saying it every week, AI is driving most of the economic development and the growth inside of the US, but also the globe. That is coming from a software layer when we're talking about developing the best models that are driving the best software products and features, but it's also at the hardware infrastructure level when we're talking about where are these models being trained, how are we getting the hardware to run the data centers that are being used to train those models, and how cost effective are those assets over the long run. Are we spending $1 billion on GPUs that can only be used for a year, or can we repurpose those GPUs for something else later down the line? That question is going to be incredibly important for leaders to answer, and for all of us to consider when we're thinking about just what comes next. And it represents a lot of opportunity for people who understand engineering and understand, even from a software engineering perspective, how do I run an application without costing the company and costing as much resources as I would if I were to create this entire stack myself. So being very mindful in terms of what you're building and the type of impact it's having from a cost perspective is going to be incredibly important. Uh, so yeah, before we jump into the questions, if you are getting any type of value from this video, please like, subscribe, uh, comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what I may have missed or what you feel like is a different take than what I've currently highlighted. Because this is a conversation. This a discussion. Because we want to have these different opinions and thoughts and see how we can continually improve them with that type of uh, discussion.
What does it mean to be a software engineer?
So, a software engineer's job is not just about writing code. Our main responsibility is to solve problems with software. And that primarily uh, means we're spending a lot of time just designing and building and maintaining the systems that exist to solve a particular problem in a workflow or to provide a specific service for a product that we're delivering. As a software engineer, your job is not just to write code and read the code, although that is a lot of what we do. A lot of our role is going to involve topics relating to security and privacy and even the environmental concerns, right? When we're thinking about how our code is impacting the real world from a usage and uh, capacity standpoint, how much energy is it using to run your code? How much time is it using? Uh, but also how that software is actually impacting the lives of the people who are using and interacting with it every day. Are you actually providing a delightful experience to your customer? Are you providing a service that people need and rely on to make them more productive or to make their lives easier? That's the type of questions we ask as a software developer. And so, when keeping that in mind, the tools that we use may change, the languages may shift, and the platforms may continue to develop over time. But the foundations of software engineering still are the fundamentals. It still is data algorithms, it's still data structures, and understanding what a computer is from a very low level standpoint. You have to understand these things and even system design before you can understand how to solve a problem and be useful as a software developer, because our job is to positively impact the world. And in order to do that, we need to understand more about the world and the tools and toolkit that we have available to us to do our job. And that requires a high level of discipline and trustworthiness. You have to be someone people can rely on today and in the future to not only not really just get the problem solved correctly, but be willing to continuously put energy into iterating and solving and making that solution better over time. Because no one's going to be perfect and no one's going to create a perfect solution. But the real traits that you're looking for inside of an engineer is their ability to go through the process of just continuing to develop and not giving up just because they hit a roadblock. And it's fun. As a software engineer, once you learn the the fundamentals, once you understand what you're doing and what's happening, and even when you don't understand exactly what's happening from a top down perspective, just seeing what you can do and what you can build with technology is awesome. The products that you see that people use every day, right? they all were built by someone who understood how to write software. And having that same skill and that same expertise and that same knowledge is exciting because you realize, hey, if this exists, I can do everything that I see is possible with technology. I can build the app, I can build the game, I can build the robot that automates picking up my laundry, whatever it may be. That that creativity is up to you. But once you understand how to be a software engineer and what a software engineer is, you have all of those doors and opportunities open to you.
How do you make sure your code works in production?
So this is a challenge that I actually have been working on over the last week or so because I'm currently uh, migrating my app Toe Pro into production. And it got me thinking about what production even was. It's really just a the components and services that you decide are going to be used by your actual customers. These are the components that are going to serve customers and actually provide the value that you need to provide in your business. And that looks very different for different products. And for my product specifically, having a it touches financials and making payments and things like that. So the challenge that is incredibly important to consider is the fact that even though you have or you should have your testing and your unit testing, your integration tests, and you should be testing long before you get to production, the truth is production is not always going to behave like the test environment. And the only way to really verify and validate that your code or your system is working is to test it, is to run it, is to see if the button does what you think it should do inside of that production environment. And so the best teams might have a bunch of controls and processes in place to make sure that the most reliable version of the code is actually entering production, but even they won't be able to say that their code is working until they actually try it. That means you have to be able to balance your risk tolerance with a level of governance that allows you to test quickly and make decisions quickly and just verify because it's never going to be perfect. That means instead of like focusing just on how do I test in production and make sure that production is always working, you should focus on having some systems in place so that anything you put in production can be easily validated and easily rolled back should you see any type of challenges or issues. So you should have inside of your environment feature flags. You should have observability. You should have a way to automate and make sure that tests are being ran properly in the right order. Because if you don't have those, there's no guarantee that the code is going to work anyway. And even if it does work, how will you ever know? And if it doesn't, you don't want your customer to be the one that has to tell you. So make sure you're investing time into having those solutions already built out before you get into production.
How can I overcome imposter syndrome?
So imposter syndrome is very difficult to even measure or define. But from my perspective, I felt imposter syndrome whenever I was not confident in what I was doing. And I say that while also understanding that confidence is not you knowing that you can solve every problem. Confidence, now that I understand, is your ability to know that you can solve a problem when given enough time. And you're going to likely feel imposter syndrome when you're put into a challenge that is slightly above what you're currently capable of, or at least there is a gap between what you think you're capable of and what the actual challenge is that you are experiencing. That's really where imposter syndrome lives. Uh, the best way to solve and overcome that problem is to continue to increase your competence, because your competence is going to open new levels of confidence for you, because you'll be more confident in your ability to have done this particular task, or you have solved similar problems, so this new problem is not something that you cannot uh, overcome, or it's not something that you cannot solve for when given enough time. uh, I like to highlight that the opposite of imposter syndrome is not you have everything figured out. And it doesn't even mean that you should wait or you should expect not to have imposter syndrome until you know everything, or even that you won't make any mistakes. When you make a mistake, it's probably a time where you're going to feel a lot of imposter syndrome, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been the one doing this, or whatever you may feel. But that's not the best way to go about it. When you're making mistakes, you need to use that time to figure out what the mistake was and how you could overcome it and learn from it. That's the best way to make sure that that experience is not just a loss for you, but that you can win and grow and gain something and be better because of it. Another thing to keep in mind with imposter syndrome is that many people don't feel ready or don't feel like they know everything. All of us are, I don't want to say faking it till we make it, but all of us are just trying things. We're trying to see what can we do today that aligns with our goals. And yes, that means you need to have goals. But it also means you need to be aware that the person and the goals that you have for your future self are not going to be possible for your current self until you actually move toward it. So don't let imposter syndrome slow you down. Don't let it be something that prevents you from making the decisions that you need and taking the steps forward that will actually give you the opportunity to have the success that you deserve and that you are seeking. And that the goal is not to eliminate the feeling of imposter syndrome. The goal is to not let that feeling distort your judgment, because whether you feel like you can do it or feel like you can't, that's up to you, and that's going to really determine whether or not you can do it. But just by taking the step forward and deciding to take action, that's going to be the that's going to be when things work better for you. So keep that in mind.
How do you coordinate an app release?
So an app release is going to be something that you have to coordinate and make sure you are communicating with your entire team and any teams that are going to be involved inside of that deployment. That means you have to agree on the scope of the changes, the timeline that these changes need to go out, and the ownership of who are responsible for either validating or making sure that these changes actually occurred. That's going to require a significant amount of coordination between yourself and the other teams involved. So that means you have to have clear ways of communication, whether it's through a document or an email chain or even uh, Teams. Although Teams, especially if it uh, deletes after a while or expires, that's probably not the best solution. But basically, you have to make sure that someone is accountable and there's a trail that can be followed to understand where we are in a particular release. And you have to have those necessary conversations, because especially when there are multiple teams involved from an infrastructure perspective, from a distributed systems perspective, where you have more than one application going out at the same time, you're going to need to make sure that all of your ducks are in row, and that you are understanding what risks are occurring with any of these changes. One of the easiest ways or the best ways to make sure that your release goes smoothly is to make sure you are decoupling your deployments from your release. You should be able to deploy your code in production without actually triggering any types of problems that could face or impact your customer. And then you should be able to deploy or release that same change very easily and smoothly, again, without causing any significant harm to your customer. So having a feature flag in place where you can gradually roll out changes to maybe a portion of your users, and then as things work and as you validate that things are working as expected, then you kind of open that up to everyone else. That's really the best way. But you should make sure that the release and the deployment feel natural. The more difficult, the more questions that exist during the release, the less likely it is for you and your team to successfully release that product or change without causing undue stress to yourself and causing significant problems to your users. And that means, again, documenting any assumptions, communicating clearly across teams and across business and technology users, uh, highlighting any expectations. What do we expect to happen when we make this change? What types of data validation can we do? What type of functionality validation can we do? And then having a strategy to actually go through and validate that things are happening the way we imagine them to happen. Once you have that in place, your release is going to go smooth like butter. And that's what you want. You don't want to have any problems, you don't want to have any bumps. You want things to just work the way you expect them to work.
What is a CVE?
A CVE is a common vulnerability and exposure identifier. CVEs were designed to make discussion around vulnerabilities and issues more easily, or more basically easier, because you have different people identifying the vulnerability, different people deciding the risk tolerance and what to do about the vulnerability, and then you have different people actually either resolving or testing that those vulnerabilities exist. So having a specific CVE ID in place allows those different people to have a unified way to discuss the problem whenever it occurs, and be able to point to, this is what the risk is, this is what it's affecting, and having those conversations, not confusing everyone based on their particular focus or perspective across the business. CVEs are they uh, CVEs are commonly detected in open source software because there are so many eyes on that software in particular. Uh, and it allows someone to say that this version of this software is currently having this vulnerability or this problem that can be exploited when used like this or when configured in this way. So usually enterprises have a way to scan for CVEs inside of their software. When you think of and hear of a software supply chain, that supply chain should always be tested to identify any CVEs, whether they are low, medium, high, or critical risk. You should always know the types of problems that your software could potentially expose to your users as you are continuing to build and deliver your service. And once you integrate that scanning into your system, you're probably going to find that you have a bunch of CVEs that are being flagged. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything wrong or that anything needs to change at this moment, but it gives you something that you can highlight, identify, and monitor over time so you can discover potentially if any of those risks are worth addressing more uh, more quickly. If you think about a CVE, think about it as a public recall that says this software could have this type of problem. That doesn't mean that your specific instance of the software has that same problem, but it means that there is something that could fail. So maybe I should take an extra look or take extra care with that particular area so that if my software or if my business is relying on that, I understand that it can break and you would rather be aware of what can break before it actually breaks and causes much more problems for your team and for your business. So think about your CVEs not as a report card. They're just something to kind of flash for you to see, all right, let me check this out. So thank you for everyone who submitted those questions. The If you have any additional questions, please put them inside of the comments or just reach out to us in our team and we will do our best to add them as initial or additional discussions inside of our series. But thank you. I hope that was helpful to you. Some final thoughts that I just wanted to share for just everyone is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I've been thinking a lot about this from the perspective of someone who feels like he's leading people toward the opportunities and the uh, things that would benefit them. And I've been placing expectations on them to actually take advantage of the opportunities that I'm sharing and of the resources that I'm giving. But that's not my job, right? I can't make them do something with what they're being given. Because even before I existed, and even after I stop existing, they will still have the opportunity to either take advantage of or not take advantage of the opportunities in front of them. It's up to them. And so if you're the person leading others down a path and you get yourself worked up about whether or not they should or are doing what you expected them to do, you need to stop because it's only going to make your life harder and make them uncomfortable. Instead, lead the people who want to drink to the water. Or you can lead everyone, and once you bring them there, you let them do what they're going to do with it. If they do nothing, that's fine. You continue to lead and bring more people to the opportunity or the resource, but you don't sit there and try to force them to drink that water. If you're the person that has asked to be led and have been led and provided the opportunity or the resources, and you're just choosing not to do anything with them, then you have to be just honest with yourself about whether or not you really are willing and how bad do you want the thing that you're saying you're asking for. If you wanted it bad enough, once you get that little hint, that little taste of it, you should be motivating yourself to drive and go get that thing. You should have it and you should be able and willing to go get it if you don't have it because you want it that bad. If you don't really push yourself to go get it, if you don't bend down, or if you don't have the patience, if you don't have the just the like, if you don't have the desire to even just lean in to go get the thing that you're saying that you want, or the thing that is on the other side, or the thing that is between you and the thing that you want on the other side, then you have to just admit that you might not want it as bad as you think you want it. And that's also fine. But just remember that, because you could have got it. You right here. You just got to drink. So with that being said, I that's what we have today. If you enjoy the series, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and just let me know how we can continue to make these conversations and this series just better for you, and how we can provide more value, because we are the next generation of technologists. We are building the software that's going to shape how the world actually operates. That's exciting. It's not easy, but it's going to be very fun. So I appreciate y'all for joining for the ride. Peace out.